This video is brought to you by my two books, Practical Music Theory for the Rock Guitarist and The Blues Guitar Bible. Want to learn about modes, harmony, scales, chord substitution and keys? Or maybe you're interested in supercharging your blues guitar rhythm and lead chops. Whatever you're interested in, I guarantee you will be hitting the fast lane to progress with either of these works. Both feature video demonstrations and tutorials, loads of tabs and jam tracks to play along with, and I promise you, everything is explained in crystal clear plain English. Check out the links in the description for more details. Hello chaps, welcome once again to John Robson Guitar Tuition. As always, I do hope you're well. It's Tuesday today, which means we're doing a top 5 list, and you've seen the thumbnail, you've read the title, so presumably you know what we're going to be talking about today, the dreaded T word, yes, music theory. This comes from last week's video where I was speaking about the 5 things that any newbie guitarist needs to sort of get figured out and get across. Basically the 5 things to check off their list of important stuff to kind of know and be able to do. And one of those things was rudimentary music theory, basically just having an understanding of what you're playing for all the reasons that I specified last week. You know, just it helps you remember stuff, it helps you figure stuff out, it just helps in many ways. Having an understanding of what you're doing is useful, basically. So that got me kind of thinking. I did a video a few years ago, many years ago, in fact probably about 6 years ago now, called The 3 Pillars of Music Theory. The 3 basic elements of music theory that if you know these 3 things, you can pretty much figure anything out that you want to by, you know, kind of extrapolating from them. And I thought, well, yeah, I'm sure I could expand that list of 3 to a list of 5. That's what I've done today, and that's what we're talking about. These are what I consider to be the 5 most important little bits of knowledge that you need. Let's not call it theory anymore, because that puts a lot of people off. The 5 bits of knowledge that you need to you know, basically find your way around the guitar in a way that's much easier than if you don't know these things. Starting with
the chromatic scale.
Yes, the chromatic scale, or to put it another way, the sequence of notes that you get if you move up any string in 1 fret increments or down the string in 1 fret increments. This is the core DNA of all music, well, certainly all Western music, which is largely what we're playing, I suppose. It's, you know, just knowing that an E note goes up 1 fret to become an F, and then goes up 1 fret to become an F sharp, which can also be called a G flat, and then goes up 1 fret to become a G, and so on and so on. You know, it basically makes it easier to remember where bar chords are. You know, bar chords are another thing that I spoke about last week, as things that you need to kind of get dialed in order to make a success of playing the guitar. You know, and I work with many students who can play bar chords, and I'll say, okay, give me a B flat. And they'll look at me as though I'm, you know, asking them to, you know, solve some, you know, simultaneous quadratic equation using differential calculus in the dark with their feet while they're drunk. You know, it's like, but if you know the chromatic scale, you can just know where chords are, okay? And knowing where chords are, that's got to be an advantage, hasn't it? You could memorize where they all are, I suppose. But, you know, that's a lot bigger task to do that, and sooner or later you're going to forget where a B flat is and play a B instead, or, you know, the one that gets me every Christmas. This one comes around because I always inevitably end up, somebody wants to learn that Slade song, Merry Christmas everybody, and you know, in that song there's a B minor chord and a B flat major chord right next to each other, and every year there's always somebody that gets those the wrong way around, and knowledge of the chromatic scale is one of the things. I'm going to look at another one later in this list which will help prevent that kind of mistake happening. Next,
1, 4 and 5 chords.
Now, I grew up playing a diet of old 50s rock and roll stuff, Eddie Cochran's Summertime Blues, that kind of stuff, and, you know, Chuck Berry songs and Elvis Presley songs and stuff, and it's all 1-4-5 chords. What I didn't realise at the time was the significance and the importance of learning that 1-4-5 relationship. It's fundamental to, well, a way that I teach of learning what chords are in a key. If you know what chords are in a key, you can figure songs out a lot more easily. You can also remember songs a lot more easily because you know the sort of the syntax and the grammar of a chord sequence, because you know which chords go together. And it's all based upon this 1-4-5 relationship, C, F, G, okay, in the key of C. Why is it 1-4-5? Because a C major scale has 7 notes in it: C, D, E, F, G, A and B, and then you're back to C again. Okay, so chord 1 is based on the first note, C. Chord 4 is based on the 4th note, F. Chord 5 is based on the 5th note, G. C, F and G. That's the 1-4-5 sequence in the key of C. But what you're also learning by doing this is, if you daisy chain a bunch of these together and then you learn that the 1-4-5 in the key of G is G, C and D, and you kind of overlap them like that, you end up learning the circle of fifths, or circle of fourths if you go in the other direction, and that is massively useful. I should do probably a video on that at some point. I did one a few years ago, but let me know if you want me to expand upon that. The circle of fifths is one of those things that I often describe. It's a bit like cod liver oil. You know it's good for you, but you're not quite sure how. But I can explain that. It's basically a useful thing for figuring many things out in music. And if you want me to do a video on it, explaining how it can be of use to you, I will do so. But the starting point for learning it for me certainly was understanding all those old Chuck Berry, Eddie Cochran, Elvis Presley and Buddy Holly songs that are based on 1-4-5 chord sequences. So definitely a useful thing to know. Next.
Majors and relative minors.
Yes, the minor and relative major, or major and relative minor. This is a relationship which is hardwired into the very source code of music itself. We owe our knowledge of the pentatonic scale to a very clever chap by the name of Pythagoras. You might remember him from your school days, and when he wasn't messing around with the mathematics of triangles, he was also kind of concerned with music, and he basically figured out this ratio that exists between notes that sound harmonious to each other, because, you know, a note is just a frequency can be measured and given a numeric value, and he figured out the mathematics of what makes notes sound harmonious together. There's a really good little documentary about this featuring Howard Goodall, which I've mentioned a few times. I'll see if I can find a link and put it in the description if you're as nerdy and geeky as me as I am about these things. But anyway, the pentatonic scale, which is what Pythagoras figured out, has that minor and relative major thing just absolutely baked into it. And then there's a strong case to be made for that every scale and every kind of way that we use to generate chords is simply an extension of those Pythagorean calculations. And if those kind of Pythagoras kind of scribblings have the minor and relative major thing hardwired into them, then that is going to be kind of in everything which is subsequently based upon them. So if you learn that C major is basically also A minor, then you know that your C major pentatonic scale is also your A minor pentatonic scale. You also know that the key of C major is also the key of A minor. You also know that any key which has a C major chord in it will by default also have an A minor chord in it, and the list goes on. That, you know, that sort of relationship between the major and the relative minor is everywhere, and you know it's just a quick sort of shortcut for working out many things. For example, I know that the A Dorian mode is the same thing as the C Lydian mode if you shift the tonality towards the relative major. That's getting perhaps a little bit, you know, kind of nerdy for this video. All I will say is that, well, remember the 1-4-5 thing from the last item on the list? Okay, C, F and G, 3 major chords, the 1, 4 and the 5 in the key of C. Each of those major chords has a relative minor. you find out what the relative minors are. Maybe you just know them because it's something that you've remembered, and then you've got 3 major chords and 3 minor chords. Those are the chords in the key of C. So it kind of ties in with this kind of thing of knowing which chords go together. So it helps you write songs, it helps you figure songs out that other people, when trying to figure out a chord sequence, rather than just going on to ultimateguitar.com and looking it up, because I'm sure you've had that experience where it's you think this doesn't sound right, and quite often it's because it isn't. So yeah, it helps you figure stuff out, it helps you write your own stuff, and it also helps you make sense of what you're playing and remember it much more easily. So that's why it's a useful thing to know. Next,
chord tones.
Chord tones, yes. This is, when I was thinking up this list, I was thinking chord tones, well, yes, for soloing, kind of landing on a strong chord note at various strategic points in a guitar solo. But then it just became, well, okay, if you know what notes are in a chord, then you can, if you're using your chromatic scale knowledge of being able to count up and down the neck and identify notes, then you can find ways of playing notes. If a chord rather just becomes a shorthand way of describing a group of notes, many guitar players think in terms of a chord is a shape that you put your fingers into on the guitar. That's how we learn it. There's nothing wrong with that. But at some point, it is very, very useful to start thinking of a chord as being a group of notes that have a particular relationship to each other. So for instance, that a C major chord is the notes of C, E and G. Okay, so if you can find every C note, every E note and every G note everywhere over the neck, then you've got much more options for how you can play a C chord. You're not always just tied to that 1 or 2 sort of cowboy chord or bar chord versions of it. It opens up possibilities. It makes soloing sound more melodic, because, as I say, landing on strong chord tones in a solo is a way of making things sound melodic. And it's also a great way of coming up with riffs, because if you want to write a catchy riff, often a good way to do it is to think of a chord sequence that has a pleasing sound, and then split each of those chords down into their constituent notes, string them together in some form of arpeggio, and you've got a riff there that works in a harmonically satisfying way, the way a chord sequence would. So that's a useful thing for many things. It ties together fretboard knowledge, soloing, chord knowledge along the neck, and the ability to write and again figure out and be able to remember other people's riffs and your own. So yeah, definitely worth casting an eye over, learning what notes are in chords. Next,
counting rhythms.
What is the best way to turn a tricky guitar part into an easy guitar part? Well, I'll give you a clue. It's something that sounds very much like this. A metronome, okay? Practicing with a metronome is basically the only surefire guaranteed way that you will turn that tricky lick into a lick that you can manage. You speed it, you slow it down, and you practice it with a metronome at a slow speed and gradually, incrementally walk the beats per minute up. You might be trying to do something at 100 beats per minute. You can play it possibly comfortably at 80 beats per minute, so try for 82, then 84, then 86, then 88, and so on. And you'll run out of steam at some point, but then leave it alone, come back the next day, and instead of starting off at 80 and finishing up at 88, start off at 84 and try and shoot for 94, and gradually you just kind of ladder it up like that, and you can learn the trickiest of things over a period of time. It works, but it only works if you know how to count the rhythm of the thing that you are trying to do, and know how to kind of, is it 16th notes, is it triplets, is it 8th notes, is it a combination of all of the above, and knowing how those rhythms, kind of the architecture of them, the structure of them, so that you can count them along with the metronome. It's also, just handy for being able to play a song correctly. I was in a band many years ago with the lead singer was also the rhythm guitarist, and I had to play a solo on the intro of this song, and he had to play the riff that I was soloing over, and it was a riff that started on an offbeat, like the and of beat. It was kind of 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and it started there, and he just couldn't get the feel of that right. And I tried explaining to him, no, you need to come in on the offbeat, but it was just so ingrained in him that to land on the downbeat that it was a song we had to end up not playing because he just couldn't get his head around it. If you'd known how to count rhythms successfully, then that would have been something that it wouldn't have been a problem for him. So, being able to count rhythms, as I say, it's one of those things that and I mentioned this last week, when you're starting to learn to play guitar, it's all about the chord shapes that you play with this hand. And if you've been shown some chord shapes by a more experienced guitar player than you, that more experienced guitar player is so intuitive about what they do with their rhythm part of the equation, if you're assuming you're right-handed, your right hand, that it often doesn't get explained. So it's just, you just feel that. Well, no, you've got to kind of develop that knack for rhythm and allow it to become second nature, but it's not just there for the taking without that. So learn to count rhythms. So you need to know your chromatic scale. You need to know the 1, 4 and 5 chords in every key. You need to know the minor and relative major relationship. You need to know what notes are in any chords, and you need to know how to count rhythms. Those are, I would say, the 5 most useful aspects of music theory that will help you in a practical way. When people talk about music theory, there's often the assumption that we're going to be talking about dominant 13 flat 9 chords, and kind of the modes of the melodic minor scale, and kind of esoteric advanced stuff like that. The truth of it is that any kind of knowledge that is useful to you, that helps you remember stuff, that helps you play it more successfully, helps you keep in time, and helps you figure stuff out that you want to learn, that is all music theory. And I bet I've mentioned 1 or 2 things on this list that you already know, but you didn't really regard as music theory. Let me know in the comments if that is the case for you, and also let me know in the comments if you think I'm a blithering idiot talking absolute nonsense. That has not you've not been shy about doing that in the past, and I've got a thick enough skin, I'm big enough and ugly enough to be able to take it. These are just my opinions, and they've served me well. Let me know what you think down in the comments. But that is it for today, folks. Hope you've enjoyed the video and found it useful in some small way, and if that's the case, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell if you haven't already done so, and why not drop me a like as well while you're at it. And don't forget the live stream every Friday 5 PM UK time. We drink beer and talk about music and guitars and whatever else, basically. It's a cracking way to kick off the weekend, and I'd love to see you there if you can make it. But for now, I'll bid you all a good day and say thank you so much for watching. Thank you for your time. Look after yourselves, folks. Stay well, stay safe, and above all, stay sane. Bye for now.